Kia ora and welcome to the Aotearoa Rugby Pod. After a big weekend of Super Rugby, the Hurricanes continue up, the Crusaders continue down. There's plenty to talk about there with that team. Now, we don't want to get too Crusaders heavy because you Hurricanes fans will get upset, but we will be talking about the Crusaders and the anatomy of a losing streak. What do you do now as far as coaching is concerned, building this team, making the most of this season, knowing that you are dead last with 6 rounds to go? It's a pretty tough time down there in Christchurch. The Blues were super impressive. The Brumbies weren't. We'll be getting into that. And James Parsons isn't around to get into too much of it, but we got a video from him from where he is in the United States because he couldn't help but contribute when the Blues are going that well. Black Ferns contracts are out. We'll be talking a little bit about who's in and who's out from the Black Ferns. We'll get to your questions from the emails from YouTube. One of you will get the Player Sport Ball, of course, for your contribution in the tipping comp. Of course, the winner of the tipping comp gets a spot on the show at the end of the Super Rugby season. So let's carry on. First and foremost, we've got a new guest in studio because James Parsons isn't here. Aaron Cruden, 50 Test All Black, 2-time Super Rugby winner with the Chiefs. Aaron, welcome. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me on, guys. Yeah, excited about it. And when you messaged, I was like, oh, a bit nervous. Should I do it? And then I was like, nah, why not? Let's get into it.
Nothing to be nervous about. We've got Brent Hall over here, the smoothest man in all of rugby.
Sorry, mate. Just was listening to your points there, Ross. Thought you were going to give me a little bit more. But no, look, really good to be here, lads. Crud's obviously awesome to have you in, mate. Love watching you doing your commentary with Sky. And obviously we love rugby here and talking code. And obviously you're very articulate. So I look forward to having a few points here and seeing what's happening in Super Rugby at the moment.
The term is geeking out. Before we get going, just tell us a little bit because people want to know what you're up to at the moment.
Just full-time dad mode, pretty much. Yeah, and the weekends doing a little bit of stuff with Sky, which I've really been enjoying. But yeah, just in that sort of transition mode of slowly phasing out of my playing days and figuring out what's next. But also just enjoying a lot of time at home with my children, which has been great.
It's interesting that that's a thing for a lot of players, isn't it? How do you get from one place to the next? I remember talking to Dan Carter about it. He was in Japan and he had his kids back here and his wife, and he was like, what am I doing here? You know, like I should be at home with them. Yeah,
I suppose everyone just probably takes it a little bit differently, but for me and my family, like we've always gone together. So I've been lucky to have great support, and they've followed me around. And now we're back in New Zealand. We're actually loving it. Like my oldest, she's going to start school soon, and you know, just that natural transition. So yeah, for us, it's been really cool. You know, I still have an itch to play, and you know, I'm still a massive fan of rugby too. So still watching a lot of games and getting amongst it. But yeah, it's just been quite a cool little period for us as a family recently.
Awesome. Now, one of the things we like to do on the show is talk to our fans. We get a lot of emails through time, and we tend to answer them, and the winner gets a piece of this ball each week. Now, we've got a question from Hayden Murray this week. Hayden has probably hit the nail on the head for everything that everyone's talking about with the Crusaders. Now, it's not going to be the Crusaders podcast, but we will be talking about them for a little bit at the start. His question: when will the Crusaders and Highlanders need to start considering changing their coaches? Well, Razor, McMillan, Cotter, Laidlaw all had immediate success after taking over. Dermody and Penny's teams are in a free fall. Granted, they've both had challenges with playing rosters, but the constant changes to the lineups, poor style of play, endless handling errors, and overall competitive for both teams is going backwards. In any other sport, the coach would be gone by now, or at least be on notice. Bryn, you've obviously spent a lot of time in that Crusaders camp, and it was a pretty difficult watch on the weekend. I mean, as a question, there's a lot to unpack there, but immediate success is expected in the Crusaders, and now that it hasn't happened, where should they go?
I think with the cattle that they have had, bar injuries, which hasn't been great, you'd expect them to be able to be in a position where they would be in the top 8 and be playing a lot better footy. And you know, I don't think it all goes back on Rob. You know, I think I've said in the last couple of weeks, the squad that they have had, and you look at the New Zealand teams of the Hurricanes, the Blues and the Chiefs, you look at that forward pack area, they're just a bit light in terms of experience. And I think the gain line area, I'd probably have to say, I'd hate to see what the stats are, but Chip would probably be able to come over the top with that. But I think the gain line percentage would probably be the worst out of the New Zealand teams. You look on the weekend against the Force, the amount of times that they were able to lose that contact area consistently, not being able to get quick ball, which in turn is really hard to defend against when you've got 13 guys on their feet. And, you look at the pitches when they played the Chiefs and they won that game, they won that game line battle. So I think just you look at the spine as well. I think it's really important to touch on that as well. You look at the hooker, George Bell, spending a lot of time, Jamie Hanna, two guys that have a big future with the New Zealand rugby. But, sometimes you need that old man strength that I've talked about and, having those kind of guys. And then obviously you've chopped and changed at 9 and 10 and that combination. Riley Hohepa has come in, but obviously he's a little bit inexperienced when it comes to Super Rugby level. You haven't had David Havili. You've got Shea Fihaki, who's a young man who hasn't played a lot of rugby. So that spine area, which I think a lot of the New Zealand teams at the moment is probably in a little bit better space. But to come back to your question about Rob Penny, I don't think he's the problem in terms of getting rid of him. It's not really Crusader-like. They don't panic. They don't tend to chuck people under the bus. And I think in time, I guess with all the players coming back for next year, I think, and at the back end of the season, you'd like to think they do have a chance, but they are running out of time. Look, I think I'm being honest. In the first 2 games in that Australian tour, I thought they'd get their mojo back and get 2 wins, but I guess with the 2 losses, they're leaving themselves a very small margin of being able to try and make the playoffs, especially with the likes of David Havili, Scott Barrett coming back.
It's a tough one, Aaron. You found yourself in a similar position at the Chiefs in 2020. You guys were 0-8. You had a lot going wrong. You also had injuries all over the place. Players who'd left for overseas contracts. There was a lot going on there. When you look at what's going on with the Crusaders, what would you say the things you learned from that season should be taken into account when they're trying to build towards, doing something this season that helps them build towards next year?
Yeah, it's a tricky one. Obviously, I guess they've been the reigning champions for the last 7 years or so, so the expectation is always high. But yeah, unfortunately in sport and life, like this time was always going to come. They've just been at the top for so long, and yeah, there was going to be a point where other teams caught up or the tide sort of changed, and unfortunately it's coincided with a lot of these changes. But time's running out in the season and people probably want answers. But for me personally, I don't know if changing a coach mid-season or even maybe after just 1 season is necessarily the answer. Like it's going to come down to, I guess, their processes as a franchise and as a club and what they're about. But yeah, look, I certainly think they've still got the makings and the potential and the quality there to turn things around. It might not necessarily be this season, but I think moving forward it can be next.
So when you were with the Chiefs and you're in that similar situation, is that the approach you guys took? It was like, hey, this is what we can achieve. Let's forget about the talk in the bigger picture. Yeah,
totally. We were consistently looking, internally into our group, our inner circle. And I think it's funny, I've talked to a few boys about this, even a lot of the boys in the current Chiefs squad that were there with me that season. But we were 0-8 and everyone just remembers, I guess, the losses. But we didn't lose those games by a lot either. I think, we were often within 7 or whatever it was. And that might sound like a bit of an excuse, but to be honest, talking to the likes of Anton and Damien, LJ, Luke Jacobson, who are still in there now, and they were that year as well. Sometimes you just have to ride through a bit of a tough time to then come out the other end. And talking to those guys, they do talk about the fact that, that season, while we were in it, we were like, oh my gosh, this sucks. This is hard when you're sort of used to winning or competing hard, but things just aren't going your way. But they will often say that, I guess, the resilience and probably the connection that they grew within that time of going through a difficult patch has sort of allowed them to learn a lot about themselves and collectively as a group, and then just propel themselves to being competitive and, pushing for titles year after year since then, I suppose.
Bryn, the other example I think probably of this is, one, you got Ian Foster. They stuck by him and they ended up in a Rugby World Cup final and maybe were a couple of yellow cards away from winning a title. And Graham Henry. New Zealand rugby just does not have a mindset of cutting ties and going elsewhere. It's work on it until you get it right mindset. Is that the way you see it?
Yeah, I think it is. It's pretty traditional in terms of what New Zealand rugby do. Very rarely do we see, the Ian Foster saga play out of what happened around that South Africa tour where the Razor was going to come or not. It was very foreign for us to even be talking about that. But again, we are a results-based business, and that's not just with players; it's with coaches, and you need to be held accountable. And even now, there's talks around Rob around what the future looks like from at the All Blacks. But I think Aaron brought up a really good point around being internal with what the players are going to do. There's only so much that coaches can do, and I think the disappointing thing for probably Crusaders fans this year is that it actually has been players that have been making mistakes for probably long periods of the game and in a lot of games, bar the Hurricanes and probably the 2 Chiefs games, even though they did lose that one in the first game of the season. Some of the stats that you had on the weekend that are just so uncharacteristic for the Crusaders. Yes, we've talked around their set piece. It was a lot better. But then sometimes it's defence. There was 14 turnovers on the weekend attacking-wise and 15 penalties collectively. So the trends that I'm seeing with them at the moment is that they can't have positive outcomes consistently for longer in games. Like they might score a try, they miss the exit. They might score 2 tries, but then they might let 2 in. There might be, like for example, here I've got in the 72nd minute when they scored their try, they had five turnovers within that period of time. And yes, they are chasing the games. And I guess when you have those kind of new guys that are coming in, you're not experiencing to win games what it feels like, and you lose it so quickly. We're just seeing the uncharacteristic mistakes of the Crusaders at the moment, and it's a common trend that has happened, and it's been really frustrating to watch. And I know inside that group that we're working around solutions, going through their process of how they can be better, but at the same time, when you're losing, sometimes you try a little bit harder, and it gets a little bit, it ends up being a little bit more worse. So. It is tough times, but I think internally, I know that group that we wanted to get it to rectify it, and they do have a couple more games against Australian teams, and hopefully, I've been saying it the whole year, Ross. I sound like a broken record. Hopefully, they can just turn a corner and just get some momentum and get a win. 1 or 2 wins, that's all it takes to be able to make this top 8, and hopefully, for Crusaders fans, that can happen very shortly.
Fingers crossed. I think we all now feel a little bit for the Crusaders. Maybe some people don't. Who knows? But thank you very much to Hayden Murray. This is your ball. The Players Sport Ball come to you very, very soon. So thank you very much for your email. And thus ends the Crusaders Rugby Pod. Let's move on to the Hurricanes. And goodness me, we've got a lot of shit for spending a lot of time on the Crusaders recently. And the Hurricanes people, they wanted their dues, and they're getting their dues because they stood up in Suva big time. The defence was strong. They scored when they needed to, and they rotated their squad for that game. And I think that's probably the most impressive thing, is, when you can see a result like that from so many changes.
Yeah, absolutely. I think rugby certainly changed in this sense as well for me, that it's not necessarily just your starting 15 or even your 23 now. Like, it is your full squad. And the teams that can provide, I guess, squad depth consistently are probably going to be there or thereabouts. Like, Crusaders have done it for years, like that 7-year winning streak they went on. When I look at the Hurricanes, like, their squad all the way through in every position really is well stacked with depth, and that's why I'm guessing also as a first year coach too, it allows you to make those decisions because guys are competing at training. When they get an opportunity, they're putting their hands up, so it can make selection difficult for coaches as well, but that's a good problem to have, and as you're saying, making the amount of changes they did, but it didn't really affect the sync or the flow of the team. That's a really good sign.
And Brett, as a player, seeing those other guys come in and do that job, the self-belief throughout the squad must be quite incredible once that gets going.
Yeah, I think as a player, I think internally as well, you hope he doesn't play too well. But I think for the coaches, it's a great problem to have. And I think, not being able to have, Asaf Moore, I think hopefully he's going to be okay. But, O'Reilly comes on and has a great game, and, Duplessis Karifi comes out and has a great game. And, Aidan Morgan, I thought, played really, really well, considering that he hasn't had a lot of opportunities this year. So, yeah, I think to win championships, and, Aaron knows this as well, with his time at the Chiefs, the squad depth that you're able to have every single week and compete at trainings. Sometimes the trainings are more harder because you know that you want to obviously fight for that jersey. And the guys that aren't in that 23 are holding it to a standard where they want to be in it, and the competitiveness at training leads into those results that you are on the weekend. So I think hopefully for the likes of the Hurricanes, the Blues and the Chiefs, I think that's the 3 top teams in the competition. Injuries are going to play a big part. Asaf Moore is gone. Cam Roygaard's gone. They had some good depth with TJ Pernard and O'Reilly coming back, but I think at the moment, they definitely are the form team. Geordie Barrett was outstanding defensively on the weekend, and Billy Proctor, I think, man, if there's one guy that might be a bolster for the All Blacks, his play with his combination with Geordie Barrett, I think is probably the best in the competition at the moment.
We've had some questions about Billy Proctor. One from Julian Bowie, basically saying, what are your thoughts on him? He sees him as Conrad Smith-esque. does all those little things. Not to mention the fact, obviously, he's got a combination there with Geordie. Do you see him as a possible All Black?
Yeah, absolutely. I see no reason why he can't be, because for me, when I look at Billy, like, he has just gotten better and better every year he's been in the league, and you're right, like when you think of combinations, like, imagine having that 12-13 combination. Absolutely. But yeah, what I probably agree with, was it Julian, was it?
Julian, yeah.
Conrad-esque, like you need those players that just, I guess, their best game is a 10, but their worst game's probably an 8. That's what it sort of is about. And that's just the consistent level that Billy's got himself to through his work ethic, I guess his skill set, probably the players around him, and a little bit of continuity now that he's been building with Geordie in that midfield for a few seasons.
His brother Matt was a bit like that too, right? Real kind of glue guy.
Outstanding, yeah. And look, he was probably pushing, knocking on the door a couple of years there too while he was in New Zealand. And yeah, it's just, I like those guys that continue to evolve year after year and almost make it hard to be left out of a team.
Now, we did get some comments through last week about why we didn't talk about Geordie Barrett going to Leinster, and also about the Morby signing Montpellier. We do record the show on a Monday afternoon, and then it gets released on a Tuesday. So sometimes if the news isn't there, it's probably because it's happened after we've recorded the show. But just a euro for your thoughts came from Mark Kelly in Ireland about Geordie Barrett joining Leinster, Bryn. Sounds like a great signing for both parties.
Oh, definitely. I think, especially with the way that Ireland rugby is at the moment, and hearing in the media around what Geordie made his decision, is he obviously wants to improve as a player. Yes, there's obviously a financial opportunity that he probably has there, but I think with the team that he's going to, and with how Ireland are playing, and pretty much an Irish stacked team, he's just going to evolve his game. I think it's great to be able to play in another environment, and especially with the Northern Hemisphere, with the the European Championship, with that experience will be for Geordie to come back into Super Rugby and the All Blacks. I think it'll be awesome for him. So I'm not too sure what the Irish were thinking. I think, obviously Alex Nankivell's gone over there to an Irish team, and with Geordie going there, that is two New Zealand teams in a pretty pivotal position when it comes to second fives in their grassroots teams. But I think for New Zealand rugby and for Ireland, I think it's a great opportunity to get an All Black going in his current peak form, to upskill himself and to experience something different. I think it's great for both parties.
That's an interesting point, because the Irish have controlled that in the past quite well to make sure that they do have enough players coming up through the system. That's two high-quality players. You played with Nankivell. He can play. Yeah,
he can play, absolutely. And yeah, some might not necessarily agree, but I'm all for moves like this, I think, gone are the days it's necessarily just north or south and that's where you stay in terms of hemisphere. I think being able to, cross over, and even for the likes of Geordie, maybe it's an opportunity for him to continue to develop as a player, but just freshen up as well. And I have to agree with Bryn, where Ireland are setting the benchmark in regards to the last few years and the style that they're playing, him going over and being exposed to that can only be better for him. And then when he does come back to New Zealand, he might be able to, I guess, install, or you'd be picking his brain as to, what were they doing here, why were they doing it, how did it work? And if we feel like we could bring a little bit of that back, I'm all for that, because it's all about evolution at the end of the day, and that's what rugby needs to be about.
Yeah, it's good having a mole in the ranks of the Irish. We can complain about that. Andrew Goodman's over there as well, so probably some conversations heading that way the Crusaders would like to get into. But while I was Googling this week, I did notice that you had an approach recently from Ulster. So can you clear up that? Because it's out in the ether that maybe that's going to happen. And what's going on there?
Yeah, so I had a good phone call with the crew at Ulster, and they were great, to be fair, really cool. And obviously, we have a bit of my wife and I and family have a bit of a thirst for travel and exploring the world. But right now, as it stands, just family-wise, we've got another baby coming soon. It just probably doesn't quite fit timing-wise. But I did obviously say to them, I really appreciated the interest, in a 35-year-old veteran that's still got a bit of game.
Old man strength, that's what Ben calls it, right? Old man strength?
I just had one thing to ask, just on that, obviously your playing career, mate. With the Crusaders having that, with Fergus Burke going down and losing lead half penny, was there actually a call from the Crusaders to get you down there? Is it 10 option?
Rinna, yes, there was. No, there was. Yeah. Jimmy Marshall gave me a call, and look, I was again pretty tempted and pretty close, but a lot of the decisions I've probably made, especially this year around like rugby and thing, it's been more based around the family and just making sure that really fit for everyone. So it was tough, like from a professional point of view and a competitor, and pretty keen to still play, but I think prioritising my family right now was certainly the way. But I'm not sure if I could have helped down there right now anyway. Like maybe a little bit of experience, but those young guys getting that exposure, I think they'll certainly be better for it in that Crusaders 10 jersey.
Well, let's move on to the Blues then, shall we? Because look, the Blues got a really solid win, 46-7 over the Brumbies. I think we were expecting a bit more from the Brumbies, weren't we?
We were, yeah. I was there for that game, and before the game, I was excited. Everyone in the Sky commentary crew was excited for the competition and the contest we thought was going to happen. But not taking anything away from the Blues, because they have just this year have been great. Like, they have really committed to playing tough, old school, we're going to go at you physical type of rugby. In essence, I thought the Brumbies probably would have been prepared for that, because that's been the Blues playing style for majority of this season. But just whatever it was, the Brumbies just seemed a little bit off. And, the 2 losses they've had this year against the Chiefs earlier in the year and now the Blues, they've been blown out. They just haven't even really come to the party. So, that's a little bit of a question mark in and around the Brumbies. But, man, the Blues, they just keep going from strength to strength right now.
It's a question mark around the competition too, isn't it? We've had a question through from Joe Bibby, and he said, look, prioritising New Zealand derbies, obviously the derbies, New Zealand versus New Zealand and Australia versus Australia in Super Rugby, gives the Aussie teams an unfair advantage in that they play more times against the Aussies, because they play 8 games against the Aussies and only 5 games against the New Zealand teams, and it helps them out. And maybe the Brumbies are a good example of that from the weekend, Bryn, that it's sometimes hard to tell from the table exactly who the top teams are because of that element. There's been a suggestion, he says, they could play each other once and then split the comp into 2 halves. So then you have the top 6 playing the bottom 6 before you get to the playoffs, and essentially provide a plate competition for the bottom 6 after the pure round robin, and then the championship competition for the top 6. Do you think that is a good suggestion from Joe Bibby?
No, sorry, Joe, I don't. I like to be able to play everybody once, and you've got the opportunity to play in a final. Now, probably the one thing that we're probably missing a little bit in the Super Rugby at the moment, the table, is that 8 teams out of 12 are making the quarterfinal stage. So it's probably a 6-man opportunity. 6 teams would probably be a little bit better. We talked about it a lot with us, Ross, that having that 8 teams, you only need to win 4 or 5 games, which I think probably doesn't add to the quality of the competition in terms of getting those amount of wins to get into the finals. But sorry, I am definitely on the other side of that. I like to be able to play the team twice or whatever it may be, or everybody once, and then you've got the opportunity to play in a final.
For me, even growing up watching Super Rugby as a kid, and probably when I first started, it was just simple because it was a classic round robin. You played everybody once, and if you played a team at home one year, you played them away the next type thing. Obviously, the amount of teams in the competition now and how many games are being played doesn't really allow that. So, I don't probably have an answer and probably don't agree one way or another. It's just I understand what he's saying in terms of, the Australian conference, again, picking my words wisely, is potentially not as strong. So, the likes of the Brumbies are going to sit at the top, but then when they come against the top New Zealand team, they really seem to battle. So, not a perfect science, and I'm not getting paid to put the schedule together. So it's tricky.
Yeah, fair enough. And look, when it comes to the derbies, we do get a lot of people watching, and that might be a big part of it as well.
You do, but at the same time, we have to have a look at if you look at the competition, Ross, we said the last couple of years, the Australians have had to come to the party in terms of being able to win matches. And, for 2 or 3 years before this year, I don't know what the success rate was. It was very, very high for the New Zealand teams winning. But now, you look at it now, I'm pretty sure it's pretty close, Ross, 50-50 in terms of Australia and New Zealand teams this year. So if we continue to keep evolving in this competition, and the more games that are playing, because obviously we did have COVID and we've lost the South Africans, and I feel like probably competition's, taking a hit due to that. But I think, with the improvement that we've seen from the Australians this year, and if it continues to keep going, we'll be in a position in 4 or 5 years' time that, arguably Super Rugby will be back in the premier competition, which I think we're not at this stage with, obviously, the Northern Hemisphere having a lot more competitiveness and more quality, I believe, in that part of the world.
Well, we'll see very soon whether the Blues are going to be right at the top of the table within this very close competition towards the top between the Blues and the Hurricanes. Of course, Jipper is over in the US of A. He's there with the World Players Association meeting. This is meetings from all sorts of sports, and he's representing New Zealand rugby over there just to see what the players are doing as far as their associations are concerned. It also gives them a chance to go to a Dodgers game and go out for dinner in Santa Monica. So not such a bad gig, but because the Blues did well, he felt like he needed to contribute. So this is Jipper on how things went on the weekend and whether he thinks the Blues are the team to beat the Hurricanes this year in Super Rugby.
They were seriously impressive once again defensively, and I feel like that's their point of difference. If there is anyone to topple the Hurricanes, I think the Blues are well placed because they just are a blue wall. 97% accuracy against the Brumbies. With that, they're dominant in the collisions. They only allowed 36% gain line for the Brumbies, and then the major finisher to their defence is only 7 penalties given away for the whole game. So they are in a really nice spot. They'll obviously have I think they play the Hurricanes round 12, and that'll be at Eden Park. So you'd have to think if they can keep delivering on that defensive platform. The one area they'd probably want to sort out is probably set piece. Like scrum's going really well, but a couple of wobbles at line out time. But other than that, scoring tries, we know that they're capable of that. They actually got a number of injuries and still performing. So hopefully those injuries may be back in time for that clash. But she's really positive signs for Blues fans and certainly exciting times.
Would you be surprised if the Blues took them out?
Look, I still think they got to get through the Chiefs first, but look, for me, those are the top 3 sides. And again, I'm big on picking form, and at this stage, it's the Hurricanes for me. But that'll be probably the team to beat for the Blues, and Jipper to be happy about it, I guess.
Yeah, Brenner, what do you think?
Yeah, I think from all accounts of how the season's gone, the Hurricanes are pretty. They'll be pretty much the favourites, I think. And I worry about the Chiefs because I'm playing the Chiefs a lot in the finals and series. They're a different beast, man. They've just got that ability to stay in it. And I know, the Hurricanes and the Blues have been the story, but I think don't sleep on the Chiefs. Do not sleep on the Chiefs come finals time.
And welcome into the show, commentator extraordinaire Ricky Sunal. You were at the Blues game on the weekend, weren't you? So I want to get your impression on that before we talk about the Black Ferns and their contracted list.
Yeah, well, I was listening in before and what Aaron was saying, and the Brumbies, gosh, they were awful, weren't they, the Brumbies? Just didn't really fire a shot, and that's not to take away from how excellent the Blues were. So I guess I would agree with Jip that the Blues could beat the Canes. I even said to someone the other day, I was like, gee, that's the game I'm going to try and get to Eden Park in a non-work capacity. But I think what Clark Laidlaw is doing with the Canes, that there doesn't seem to be any flaws in them at the moment, really. So that's a total fence sit, really, wasn't it, from that one completely.
And you just happen to be a Hurricanes fan as well.
Well, I like to say I'm a neutral commentator, but people who do know, so you've known me too long, Ross, you know that I have Wellington connections back from many years ago.
Yeah, fair enough. That's a good fence sit again. You did very well there. Very well. Your professionalism can never be questioned, Ricky. Absolute middle ground with the commentary. Let's talk a bit about this Black Ferns squad. There's a few interesting omissions out of the squad and a few interesting starts. Let's start with the positives. Jip has been going on about Hannah King for a while now as a really good option. She's in as a 10. We've seen 2 new halfbacks come in. Bryn loves Kalia Awa as a 9, and then also Maya Joseph has come into that squad. But there's a few people that have missed out there, Ricky. Are you surprised by those selections?
Yeah, look, I think so. I was going through the list, and there's 11 new contracted players, and 3 of those are ones who were contracted years ago. Marcel Parks, actually, the Matatu prop, that was one that surprised me in getting her selection. She hasn't had a heap of game time. But Charmaine Smith was a no-brainer to bring back in. Kai Paul Olsen Baker, no-brainer from Matatu. Mama Vaipulu, the blues lock, who's just a rock star in the making. I think those new ones were no-brainers. I love the Kalia Awa selection as well, and I think again the Hannah King one too. But I think looking through the emissions, the ones that have surprised me most: Aotearoa Marino Tauhini, the halfback from the Chiefs. No Grace Brooker. No Crystal Murray. Which was probably the one that surprised me most. And the other one was Rosie Kelly. I don't think Rosie had a great season for Matatu. So those 4 kind of omissions seem the biggest. I do gather there's still some talk with Crystal Murray at the moment, and where she may end up as well. But Marino Tauhino particularly, I think it was a surprise, given not necessarily a lack of depth at halfback, a lack of experience. Eri Tanahohaya, Ariana Baylor, I think both well less than 10 tests each. And then you've got Maya Joseph, who's at halfback /10, and then Kalia Awa, who's basically come from, Hawke's Bay out of nowhere last season, and I think changed that Aupiki final in favour of the Blues. So a great selection, but very, very raw in that halfback area as well. So a little bit surprising that the experience of Marino Tauhinu's not in there.
What are your thoughts on that, Bryn?
Kalia Awa, man, I think she is one for the future in terms of what I think the game that she does bring. She's very, very smart in and around the way that she does go, picks the options of being able to go a short side, sees the space, and is constantly looking at that hard defence, which, Kendra did very, very well. So I think she's going to be a great acquisition for, I think, the Black Ferns rugby for the next 3-4 years. I think, Maya Joseph, like you said, Ricky, we've only got 2 10s, so whether they're going to see her as a hybrid, the All Blacks obviously do a little bit different at 10 and 15, but with 2 10s, they might see Maya Joseph, or obviously Maliepu can jump into 10 as well. But yeah, I really like seeing young 9s coming in, their experience, and I think Kalia Awa, she's definitely one to watch. One thing, Ricky, I'm very surprised though. I think she had a great season with Amy Duplessis. Grace Brooker wasn't in that contracted system. I think she had a great year. Has come back from a really hard time with injury, and I thought it was one of the Matatu's best. But were you quite surprised with Grace Brooker not being involved with that?
Yeah, I think that's probably the other big omission, and it's so tough because Grace is a universally popular, great human being as well. I think, as you say, that injury a couple of seasons ago really has set her back, and I look at the midfielders that have come in. Monica Tangawai from the Hurricanes, who was a Black Fern back in 2018, had just a dreadful run of injury, but has probably been the Hurricanes' best the last couple of years, and she's that tough, strong, abrasive midfielder. And then now that Grace Steinmetz has made the conversion from being an outside back, and she really did slip into at 12 so well for the Chiefs this season. I just think Grace Brooker, it looks like she's been rolled over the top of a wee bit by a couple of those other players. And I guess going to your point of the young players coming through with that World Cup as well, now's the time to find out, right? Like, you've got a year and a half until the next World Cup. England are clearly superior to everybody by, it looks to me, a little bit of a distance at the moment. We'll see next week when they play France in the Six Nations where that gap is at. But to see what these players have got, they've got, some good hard test matches coming up this year to find out. You know what you're going to get from Grace Brooker. You know what you're going to get from Marino Tauhinu. It's difficult though, right? Because these are contracts that allow them to still train full time. It's different to the guys. They can still be selected for the Black Ferns just because you're outside of this contracted squad, but it changes not just their rugby life, it changes their whole life, being on a contract or being off a contract.
And then that can snowball, right? Like, you've had that extra time to train, so therefore next year you should be better, and so on and so on.
Totally. And this is the argument with Aupiki, right, is that half of the squads are on these short-term Aupiki contracts while the other half are effectively Black Ferns who are training full-time in the hubs and all of that. And so it's tricky. There's no, it's not a perfect solution by any stretch at the moment. But the fact that they've gone from 34 contracts last year to 40 contracts this year shows that pool is growing. There are 3 players who are on sort of interim contracts heading into to Pack 4 in a couple of weeks' time. That's Liv McGovern, Mia Anderson, who was really impressive for the Chiefs, and Pip Love, the veteran prop, who's another one who's missed out on a full contract. So, as I say, just because you're not in this contracted squad doesn't mean you can't or can't be a Black Fern this year.
Liv McGovern's an interesting case, isn't she? Because she went away, she took her time to become professional in the world's top professional women's rugby system and has come back a different position and a different player.
Yeah, and that's obviously the indication that she is possibly the next cab off the rank, that she's got that interim and yeah, that kicking game, that ability, because what we have seen from the Black Ferns, and it worked to such great success when they won the World Cup, is just basically this attack, run it attitude. Whereas in WXV last year, they got caught out because the exit wasn't necessarily to basically run it out from your own goalposts every time. Sometimes at work, it's not always going to do that, particularly against England. So yeah, adding that in with McGovern would certainly help.
Do you think we'll have a Matt Henry Cricket World Cup situation here where she just comes straight into the team from outside the squad if Ruahei was to go down?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, but then, they've selected Hannah King for a reason, haven't they? They've given her this contract, so they've clearly seen probably more than what we've all seen, because I think anybody who's watched Hannah King this season could see her potential and the talent there in a team that got pretty well beaten in some matches, going backwards at times as well. So it's a tricky one. Is Liv McGovern straight away the next one? And if Ruahei goes down, it's a bit of a worry to think that, right? Like, who is your next 10 if you lose Ruahei Demant in any way? Because, McGovern, Hannah King, Patricia Maliepo, or do you call back to a Rosie Kelly who has actually played Test rugby? Because, yes, Maliepo has, but not a lot at 10 at the international level.
Aaron knows a thing or two about having 4 or 5 first fives come through a World Cup and still win the title, including yourself. Can you talk a little bit about, I suppose, the blooding of those players over time through a cycle? And I suppose, one, from a player's point of view, the patience that's required to understand that's necessary for the larger team, and 2, for the way that it works to make sure that the team can function at the end.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I like what Ricky said earlier about, like, this really is the time now to do a bit of that blooding, isn't it? A year and a half out from a World Cup cycle, and bumping into a few of the girls around Hamilton in recent years, especially Kennedy Simon. Like, she mentioned last year, playing against some of these teams like England and France who came out, who are fully professional and get that sort of exposure year in, year out, they needed to probably start blooding some of these younger players. And I think this season's going to be another example of that. Like, yes, they're picked on ability, but also ability only gets you so far. It's then experience, time in the saddle, that is going to allow you and also the coaches to see how you handle it, what adjustments, what work-ons that you need to make. And then hopefully from that, it sort of builds that cohesion and the depth starts to grow in each position.
And that way the Pack 4 with, I suppose, the slightly lesser teams from that area of the world can kind of help in that building, as opposed to, going into the WXV where it's going to be pretty difficult. Yeah,
absolutely. And again, it's not always, like the timing-wise in terms of, you see it in the men's game as well, like some teams are at the beginning of their seasons when you cross over hemispheres, and others are at the end. So some players are fresh and ready to go, and others are a little bit burnt out by the time that things happen. But it is great to see, I guess, the development and more exposure in the women's game and what we're getting now.
Mm-hmm. So, Ricky, looking forward to the Pack 4, which is only a few weeks away. Do you see that this team is going to be as dominant as they have been in the past, or do you think that Canada or Australia or the USA will get a little bit closer to this squad than they have?
Yeah, well, those teams are all in quite interesting phases as well. Both USA and Australia have got new head coaches coming in. I think Australia made some huge strides in WXV last year, and you can just see the increased resource they've got for the first time ever. This is where we're at, that Australia has a full-time head coach. They haven't had that in the Wallaroos before. Canada are doing a lot of mixing up with their sevens squad, and the sevens team has improved out of sight in the past season, but they've got a Sophie de Goody who's playing sevens regularly now and coming back in. Olivia Apps, the sevens captain. So they translated that pretty well. So I see Canada improving too. And saying that, you look through these players, and Aaron mentioned Kennedy Simon. I think through these Lucy's, Kennedy Simon, Liana McKaylee too, Kai Paul Olsen Baker, Layla Say, anybody in the world would be happy to be able to pick from that group. Like, it's super exciting as well. So I think this is overall Pac 4 and then going into WXV later in the year. It is an absolutely fascinating year, like massive 6 months for the Black Ferns, for the coaching team, for the whole setup to set them up for next season, for next year, for the World Cup.
I can't see them.
Ricky, just on there, obviously you've got the WXV obviously in the back end of the year. What do you want to see? Where do you think the improvements are with the Black Ferns that we need to see? Obviously they won the World Cup, and they played the English side and, obviously weren't as successful. What are the areas that you're hearing or what you think they should be working on? The kicking game is obviously a big one. You talked around the exits and not being able to play from your own half for 15 phases and try a hole in the ball.
Wouldn't
What
it
do
be
you
nice?
want to see in that area of the competition? Yeah.
Yeah, look, I think it is across the board. It's some of that rugby now stuff, the decision making and the execution under pressure. We know that this is a team and these are players that can break out and score tries from anywhere, but to build tries and to create continual pressure on a team like England, who are just going to smash you all the time, set piece against England and France, and forward play in general against England and France was exposed a little bit late last year in that WXV. But yeah, I think, as I say, for me, it's just that execution under pressure, smart decision making, all of those kind of things that do come with time, and some of those basics, because, as I say, the players are there to bust out, to do anything. But what I'd love to see is that continual building of pressure throughout a game to make smart decisions over and over again.
Aaron, I think, like, sometimes when I watch the All Blacks, that sometimes you play to a game plan in a World Cup for the sake of playing to a game plan. It's like you give up the other vision that you see at times to play to that game plan. Is that something that might do the Black Ferns some good right now, to just go, okay, this is how it is? I know you can see a double skip pass out wide with a bridge pass or whatever to get away, but we need to nail this.
Yeah. Honestly, I guess that's always the challenge, right? Like, you want players to be able to play to a system, but also you pick players because you want to be able to say, play what's in front of you. But yeah, agreeing with Ricky, like, when you compare, especially the teams over in the north, where, to be fair, it's probably condition-based. Like, they play in some pretty difficult conditions, so that almost influences them to be able to make sure they're shaping a lot around their kicking game, putting themselves in the right parts of the field, playing that sort of percentage rugby to an extent, which sometimes in New Zealand it might be a bit hard for people, but we'd be like, oh, well, we'd rather score from our own try line. We're like, well, yes, that might happen every now and then, but it's not going to be all the time. So totally agree and hear what you're saying. Like, if we can be disciplined to, yes, continue to work to the structure or a system that we're trying to play, rather than just breaking the shackles open every time we see an opportunity, I think that's going to put us in a better spot. The counteract to that is, if that doesn't translate into results early and pressure comes on and we're in an outcome processed business, then you start to challenge that mindset of, okay, system and structure over, I guess, raw ability and playing heads up footy. So, to be honest, it'll be tricky to be a coach, I think, because it would be very tricky. But yeah, I guess if your biggest goal, again, is trying to defend that World Cup that we won, and you think, okay, there's going to be those knockout games where we probably just need to tighten the screws a little bit and play percentage-based rugby at times, I think this would be a great opportunity in the next little tournament and competition to do a little bit of that stuff.
Well, Ricky, it's very exciting. Thank you very much for joining us once again on the show. Maybe your third appearance?
Something like that. I don't get a call up very often, so very special occasion.
No, I think you're first equal with Ben O'Keefe and Will Genia. So very strong competition for the top of the list for multiple appearances.
Random trio, but I'll take it.
Thank you very much again, Ricky. We'll see you soon.
Cheers, guys.
Okay, let's move on to the Super Rugby tipping comp, tipping.super.rugby, and the Hurley gang is on top and looking pretty good at 38 points along with TCR Tom. So whoever wins gets a spot on the show. We look forward to seeing you in 6 or 7 weeks' time at the end of the round robin. Guys, there's a few things to pick this weekend. Some challenging ones, I think, especially the first one up, the Crusaders against the Rebels. Aaron, like, normally, I mean, this wouldn't even be a conversation. It is. Will the Crusaders win at home against the Rebels?
Oh yeah, like my picks have been all logical picks so far this season, but it hasn't necessarily worked out for me. So yeah, I thought they'd go to Perth last week and get the job done over the Force, but yeah, obviously that didn't happen. I think, yeah, I'm going to have to go with the Crusaders back home, sleeping in their own bed, seeing their family again. I think that's probably just going to get them over the line. Like, yeah, I've seen the Rebels play a few times this year, and they're certainly making strides, but I think they've probably been one of those sides also who are a little bit inconsistent. So I'm going to go with the home team and tip the Crusaders this weekend.
Bryn, I know where you want to go.
Oh, mate, you know where I go. I've pretty much gone the whole year, so that's why I'm so poor in my picking. I'm probably the bottom of the ladder, but I'm going to go with the Crusaders. But the one area that I am worried about, which we've talked around, Jip's brought it up a lot with when it comes to the Rebels, they're the best team in the competition when it comes to the gain line percentage. So it's an area that I think the Crusaders are a little bit poor in terms of needing their old man strength and with the injuries, and probably haven't been able to assert their dominance bar maybe 2 games this year against the Chiefs and the Hurricanes. So, yeah, they're in for a big job. And if I'm the Rebels, yeah, I'll be backing my chance in and around, especially that forward pack and what they've done throughout the year. Yes, they are sometimes inconsistent, but they have the ability to overpower them. So it'll be a big week for that forward pack this week at home.
Right.
But going the Crusaders.
Go the Crusaders. You almost talked yourself out of it there for a second, I think. Like, there was a strong argument.
It's got to give some substance, mate, to our Rebel supporters that love me dearly, in Melbourne.
Yeah. Bryn loves the Rebels. They have him on the dartboard in the changing room. Tars v Chiefs. Bryn?
Yeah, Chiefs will get the job done. Bonus point.
For you?
Yeah, it has to be for me. I think the Chiefs obviously coming off the bye, also a loss a couple of weeks ago in Wellington. They're going to want a pretty resounding performance to stay in the hunt and remind the rest of the competition that they're there or thereabouts. So I think they'll go to Sydney, which actually traditionally has been a pretty tough place to go for the Chiefs, and I think they'll be aware of that.
Cool. Now, the Drua at home against Moana Pacifica, they played early on in the comp, but it's hard to imagine in Fiji anything not going the Drua's way, Bryn.
Yeah, definitely. I'll pick the Drua. I think they'll be pretty disappointed. I think with the Hurricanes game, a beautiful scene in terms of, of being sold out in Fiji, and I guess with what they were wanting and the success that they've had against not only New Zealand teams, but at home, and with the performance they put in, I think they'll review hard and we'll see a little bit more clinical Fijian team, which they probably weren't in the second half, giving away a lot of penalties and a lot of mistakes. So they'll probably tie that up a little bit and put a better performance against Moana Pacifica this week.
Yeah, straightforward for me. I think, agree with Bryn in terms of the drill being disappointed in last week, because when you watch the game, they actually created a lot, like they're always going to. But whether it was just the last pass or the timing of someone's running line just was slightly off, and then the Hurricanes were able to capitalise with transition, which they do extremely well, and put the draw on the back foot. But it'll be a tough ask, I think, for Moana over in Fiji. Speaking
of the Canes, away against the Brumbies, they currently are unbeaten. Do they remain unbeaten over in ACT?
Yes, they do for me. Just based on what I've seen from the Hurricane side and the way that they get into sync very quickly, whether it's at home or away, and also based on the fact from what I saw from the Brumbies last week. I know they'll be better, but I don't think they'll be that much better in regards to challenging the Hurricanes. Straightforward for you, Brent?
Yeah, it is straightforward, but actually quite a funny point that Aaron brought on around matchup for teams. The last 2 times they have gone to Canberra, be it being in quarterfinals, they have lost to the Brumbies. So if there is a banana skin, it could happen. But I just think with the way that they are playing, the depth that they have with whoever they want to, they'll get the job done. I think the Brumbies are still struggling when it comes to tackle percentage around those low 70s, early 80s. So yeah, I think the Hurricanes will be too good for them in Canberra.
Highlanders, sitting 10th. Force sitting 11th. They're playing in Dunedin. Based on what you saw last week against the Crusaders and what you've seen recently from the Highlanders, you would normally say again, Highlanders at home in this game, no problem at all. Is it that straightforward?
Yeah, it's probably not for me, this one. I mean, just also considering like the Highlanders put up 0 points last week, like that's... So again, that's going to obviously, they'll use that as a little bit of motivation, and it'll probably be a bit of a chip, and being back home under the roof hopefully will bring a bit of energy. But for me, this is probably just the flip of a coin to be fair, in regards to picking. So, I'm just going to go the Highlanders because I'll be a bit patriotic in that respect.
Yep, and they're at home.
Yeah.
If you're 50-50, right?
Yeah.
You go the home team. Brent, from what you've seen from the Highlanders, why are they not scoring any points, and how will that affect them in this game?
Well, I think you've got to credit the Reds on the weekend. Look, I think there are passages of play there where they, in the first half and even especially in the second half, they had to defend 20 phases, 13 phases, and 10 phases, and that just comes back to the Highlanders, very similar to the draw, not being able to hold on to the ball when they need to. So they were able to have opportunities, but with what's happened probably a lot with this Highlanders team, very similar to the Crusaders, they haven't been able to have those positive outcomes and been able to be consistent like that. There's been times where they've done things really well, but then, on the weekend, in the first half, they had 5 penalties at the 15th, 19th, 21, 22nd, and 24th minute. So when you're given the Reds team, which we talked around Ross, when it comes to their forward pack and they just roll up their sleeves and get into their work, they didn't get the results. So, yeah, flip of the coin, but being down in Dunedin, been in their own beds, and I guess with what the high octane Forsyth bar does give you, you'd have to think that the Highlanders will get the job done. So be very similar to Aaron. Flip of the coin, but yeah, we'll go the Highlanders.
Yeah, the Highlanders. And what about over in Queensland? The Reds are hosting the Blues.
Oh, that's going to be a good game. I'm going to go for the Blues, but I know the Reds, just traditionally, Aaron knows this as well, being in Brisbane, it's hot, muggy, and even on the weekend as well, it's really difficult conditions to be able to win footy games. But with what you saw on the weekend against the Brumbies and how good that full pack's going piece-wise and their collision at the breakdown area, I think they'll just be a bit too much in that power game and around their breakdown, and will get the job done against the Reds.
Yeah, I think this is probably going to be closer than maybe some people think. Yeah, I just think the Blues will probably, with that power game again, roll the sleeves up and sort of be prepared to take them to a dark place. And it was interesting, last weekend I heard Vern say something pre-game, and it was he knew that they were going to be tested at times against the Brumbies, which unfortunately they weren't tested all that much. But it was the language that he used, that they were excited about that. They were prepared for that. They knew it. It's just rugby. They know it's going to come at some point. And instead of walking away from it, it's being prepared to walk towards it and embrace it and say, okay, you're going to have your moments, but if we get things right, we'll have more than you, and that'll translate to a win, hopefully.
That relentless nature, it appears to be the new Blues, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And again, when I'm talking to people or I hear people speak, I'm really conscious of listening to what they say and the language. And again, we interviewed Caleb Clark after the game, and it was really interesting to hear him speak as well. And he said, you're a byproduct of your environment, and this year they have committed to that physical aspect of the game up front. And you watch their wingers, they are almost like extra forwards. Caleb's working off his wing. Mark Talia for years now has just been unbelievable in and around the ruck, almost unstoppable one-on-one. So they have really committed to that, to try and grind down teams, say, okay, we're going to play that physical style. You see if you can match it with us, and we'll see at the end of 80 minutes how it goes. So, yeah, that was really impressive, actually. And one thing he also said, which I quite liked, was he actually paid respects to the years that have gone before as well. Obviously, they're having a lot of success now, which is great. But he said a lot of the work has been done, and you're seeing a bit of a product of it now for, I guess, some of the hard work they've done in the last few seasons too. And I just thought that was really cool to do, because it's easy to get caught up in the here and now and think, yep, we're on a roll, but there's actually lots of processes that happen before, I guess, the present moment too.
Yeah, and I think the good thing, the good environments that I've been a part of, you're all aligned. And when the messages are coming from coaches, management, CEO, board members, or whoever it may be within the environment, you're hearing the same messages. You can see that players are going to care for the team because you're all aligned. And so the Blues definitely have that at the moment, and it's actually really nice to watch them and being able to do all the grunt work and all the 1%ers, all the things that some us as rugby players we love to see. They're doing all those 1%ers. Hoskins Tutu, Akira Ioane, McConnell has been great for the Blues, and all these unsung heroes that are doing all these 1%ers. You're seeing it with the Blues at the moment. So yeah, it's actually been really refreshing to watch the Blues this year, and that kind of stern edge that Vern Cotter has brought on over the top with obviously Liam McDonald and what they've done previously in the 3-4 years.
On that note, Brent, head off to training. Thank you very much for your time again today. We'll catch you very, very soon.
Thanks, guys. Crud's good to have you, mate.
Cheers,
Unreal.
bro. Good to see you.
And Aaron Cruden, thanks for coming on the show again, mate.
No
really,
worries,
really
yeah.
appreciate your insights.
Thank you. No, it's been a pleasure. And one last thing, just don't sleep on my Chiefs, please.
There you have it. Don't sleep on the Chiefs this weekend. They're going to win against the Tars, no doubt about it, and come up to maybe win the whole thing. Is that what you're saying?
Fingers crossed. They've certainly got the makings to do it, but yeah, it's going to be a tight battle. I think, you know, ideally those 3 New Zealand teams will probably be there or thereabouts,
Yeah.
and yeah, well, I'm just going to sit back with my popcorn and enjoy the ride.
Totally. Awesome. Now, thank you very much for joining us as well. We appreciate you. Make sure that you tune in to us on YouTube, on all of Sky Sports platforms, on Rugby Pass TV as well. Thank you very much. Send us an email at Aotearoa Rugby Pod at sky.co.nz. Leave comments in the comments sections and we'll try our best to have a look at what you're after and bring it into the show. So thank you once again. Mā te wā.